As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture the stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Shawn Finnegan is a girl daddy and specializes in scaling business by scaling relationships. Shawn Finnegan has a background as a serial entrepreneur. His career began at AOL-Time Warner, where he opened a customer service center in Tucson, Arizona, hiring over 500 people in 8 months. He later became a general manager, overseeing 750 employees. In 2009, he co-founded a live events business, achieving over $100 million in annual revenue and hosting events globally. Shawn also invested in Tax Hive alongside Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, providing tax services from thousands of business owners annually. Shawn is a podcaster and co-author of Ignition Point. So, Shawn, brother, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really, really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate you.
Cool. So I always like to start at the beginning. I know Hustle and Grind is about where we got to where we're at and why we do what we do. And the first thing I always like to define is, what do you do? You do a lot.
Right. Yeah, a lot. Got a lot cooking.
Absolutely.
Well, first things first is, you're my go-to guy on presentations, as you know. So I'm in a lot of events. I do lots of networking. I build relationships, and many of those people want to do events or do events, but they just don't have the skills that you have. So you're always like just the easiest kind of referral, have you come in and work your magic. There's so many, I do maybe 2 or 3 events a week, and there's times I come in, I see presentations and it's the worst slides I've ever seen in my life, like single, spaced and just packed with stuff. And I'm sure it's got to give you the willies when you see that stuff.
Oh yeah, I call it visual junk food because it's exactly like junk food. It's really good. It makes us feel really good, but there's no nutritional value to it. It doesn't actually do anything.
That's a great point.
Really
I love it. That's so true.
And people don't realize that it activates your mind's speech processing centers. So people are watching you, or they're watching your slides, not watching you. They have no idea. You could be talking about aliens up there. They have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
And so we're programmed to read left to right. So if you put a big thing in front of us, you just automatically start reading it and you start zoning out the speaker, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And you're not able to process those two pieces of information. I just want to naturally read something, right? Yeah. So it's not really worth it. But yeah, I know, like specifically with your facility and all of the fun stuff that you have out there, that I love that facility, man. That's I love doing events there. It seems like my second home at this point.
That pretty much is. I'm gonna start charging your rent, bro. Yeah, it's gonna start charging rent for showing up here so much.
It's one, so something like that, bottled water or some other thing, kind of cool. Cool new mountain bike is my new.
I'll take it. I'll take the form of payment and helping me with my PowerPoints.
There you go, man. There you go,
All
man. Awesome. So so you've got you also kind of talking about your event space there and Tax Hive and what you do and all of that fun stuff. What you got going on, and what's your backstory behind it too? Because you've got some fun stories, man.
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur through and through. So I wish I could go on a time machine and tell myself not to be an entrepreneur at times. It's like, hey, don't do that business.
Don't we all?
In a year, just don't do that. So that's me. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done multiple businesses, everything else. I'm investing right now. So you saw Tax Hive is a big, facility here. Tax Hive does bookkeeping, filing, tax planning. Most entrepreneurs don't spend any time on taxes at all. And Kevin O'Leary is an owner in that business. And so Mr. Wonderful is Shark Tank. And so we do a lot of marketing with his brand, everything else. And it's a phenomenal company. It's phenomenal. So a lot of the events you see is part of the Tax Hive brand.
Exactly. And I love what Tax Hive did, kind of the basis for it, where it's like, as entrepreneurs, we suck at it. It's something like bookkeeping. I have a business degree and I hate bookkeeping. I won't do it because it's just not my zone of genius. It's not something I like doing. It's something that we kind of have to do, And so I think for that preparation part, and also I think one of the things with Tax Hive too, I just want to talk about it briefly, is you guys are really good at education. That's your thing. It's teaching people, like knowing Augusta rule, that I can rent my house out to myself 14 days a year, tax free.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
If I have to pay my taxes, I want to know all the loopholes, right?
Amen to that. 100%. Yeah. so many times we go from W-2, which you can take up to 10 deductions as W-2, and then you become a business owner. There's over 1,400 you can take, but no one sits you down. No one does a crash course and says, hey, Andrew, congratulations, you're a business owner now. You can now take access to it. So what we find is when we look at last year's taxes, we find that there's like 2 or 3 deductions is all they're taking. And so then they have all this liability and tax that they have to face at tax time. It's miserable. It's just a bad way to go.
Yeah. And the least that I can legally pay my unintentional business partner, Uncle Sam, the best.
Yeah. I mean, the whole code, a lot of people are like, oh, the code, but the code's actually your friend, right? The code's written to increase GDP. This country wants you to be successful in your business and bring in lots of revenue because their revenue goes up, right? So you use it to your advantage as a business owner. You take advantage of every opportunity you can of how our whole code was written. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now,
yeah.
So how did you get into the tax business?
Yeah. So, early on, we're trying to solve problems for business owners. And we looked at the market and we're like, hey, who is underserved? Generally, as an entrepreneur, you want to find some group that's underserved or some opportunity. But entrepreneurs talk about solving problems where what we found is these small business owners just try to do the taxes themselves. If they went to the big 4 accounting firm and said, hey, I'm a small business owner, I do $1 million top line revenue, can you help me? They'd be like, no, just come back when you're much bigger than that. So there's this little group under there. It's just the silent small business owner that gets that's underserved. So we came up with the idea of helping serve that community.
Absolutely. And I think, again, these small businesses, they can't hire these huge companies. They hire accountants. I've personally been through a few accountants, and it's just one of those. Some are really good at taking all the deduction. Some are not as good at it. And having, it is a really underserved position. It's really an underserved population. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, and so of course we're thinking, okay, who would be a great brand out there that we could attach this business to? Right? Who's a household name as an entrepreneur? Who can we attach this business to? That if we attach this business to them, then it could be a multiple on the business. And of course, Kevin O'Leary came to mind. He was a friend of ours. We traveled with him a bunch on a bunch of different events we'd done together. So we reached out to him to present him the business. He didn't know what we were going to present him with at all. We did all our, if you watch the show, numbers, if you don't know your numbers, you're dead to me. So we did all the numbers, the math. Chris Brown, actually the CEO, stands up to go pitch into it, and a couple minutes in, literally stopped. He stopped Chris and said, "I'm in," and they struck a deal together, working with Kevin, and it really changed the whole dynamic of that business. I mean, he's an incredible human being, an incredible brand.
I think if I remember the story correctly, you were the one that was pitching him, and when he told you to stop, you had a brief cardiac event.
Yeah. Immediately, your heart sinks into your gut. And you look over at everyone and you're like, man, I messed it up. And you kind of get that sense of how I've been on this Shark Tank set twice now, and I've seen the pitches in person. And just understanding a little bit about that is that a lot of the stuff's writing on this. You have a business, you have people that you are banking on you to bring it home, and you have this opportunity to connect yourself with a great brand. There is a lot of pressure. So yeah, the second it was a no, it was like gut in the just sank, and heart sank, and look over, and then he's like, I'm in. And then it took some time to get it, but it was an amazing deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's at those moments in our lives as entrepreneurs where when you're way outside your comfort zone and there's a level up, it's like the boss fight in the end of a video game. It's like that thing where it's going to be hard to get over. It's something that's intimidating, but once you get to the other side, it's much better. And it's one of those are the best moments in business, right?
Yeah, amen to that. 100%. Yeah, it's when you do that and you have it's there's downsides with business, running your own business, but there's also great, incredible upsides. When you get a deal done, it is the best rush on the planet, and you're so excited, and it drives you, and it increases the passion, and there's nothing better than getting a deal over the finish line.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, especially with the podcast, and that's why I like to focus on that hustle and grind, and what makes us do it is there is a passion behind it. The tagline on the podcast and the opening part is, we left our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. for a reason. And we have this real passion behind it. And it's almost a calling, I'd say.
Yeah. It sure is. you know, one of the things I do is dedicate some of my time to help mentor young entrepreneurs that are, I go to an incubator once a month or so for a couple hours, and I meet individually with these entrepreneurs and I talk to them. And it's so fast. Talk about hustle and grind. One of them I talked to yesterday is literally selling plasma to to put it into his business, right? And I have so much mad respect for the people who are taking that leap of faith and jumping in. What I've seen commonly is a lot of them don't pay themselves for a long time. Like this individual was not taking any revenue. And I'm a big believer in having some kind of incentive. Most business owners, like, I'm not going to pull anything out for years. It just law of attraction changes when you take, hey, I'm going to take 1% and I'm going to pay myself 1%, or I'm going to pay myself this amount of the volume coming in, and then that number will grow. But a lot of these young entrepreneurs are like, now they just got to live on ramen for 3 years while I'm trying to make it, which is a hustle and grind.
Which is good. If you're in your 20s, I think it's an acceptable way to do it, because you can't live, you're not expected to, there's all these expectations on you. You don't have a family to raise. You don't have all of these things. Your 20-year-old body starts metabolizing food when you see it before it goes in your body. Stuff like that, Yeah. And I think that, once you try that when you're older, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah. One of the entrepreneurs yesterday said, well, what's your nut a month? What covers the cost for you? And he said, oh, I have all the math. He's like $1,750. That's all that's his whole nut, all in. And I just love and respect entrepreneurs that are willing to take that step and go through those grinding years, because there's nothing easy about the path and the journey.
Yeah. Well, and being on the other end of that, I think for you, it's like there's a payoff that's much bigger. I mean, most of the time people think, oh, I'm going to wait until I'm 65 or sometimes 70, sometimes 75, to retire, if they retire at all. And they don't have any flexibility even after they do it. I mean, so, I think you've seen more of that as far as the other end of it is, what am I working towards, and what's that hustle? What's my payoff on that? Not just financially, but what's my actual payoff on it? And that's the freedom.
Yeah. I love my buddy Richie Norton's book. I don't know if you met Richie, but he comes to some of my things. It's called Anti-Time Management. And the whole concept is what you just mentioned, is we're trained to wait until we retire to enjoy our golden years together. We vacation, travel, all that kind of stuff, and spend the time with the family. His book is basically the antithesis of that a little bit. He calls it time tipping, where you take those moments that you expect to have when you're 65 and you bring them into today. Because I think that sometimes we get so caught up in it and we get so into the grind that we lose relationships. We forget about what's important. And it's like taking that time, right? So his book is all about just taking, hey, if it's an hour a day, or if it's 30 minutes, or hey, it's a little weekend getaway, you still enjoy your family, still enjoy your loved ones, build the relationships, and don't lose those as you build the kingdom, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it goes back to Sean Whalen's core four, and which is important, and part of that is the relationships. And you're right, we get so obsessive sometimes, we just kind of go into our dungeons and kind of just hustle away and completely forget about it. I remember somebody a while ago, I think it was a client of mine, telling me that basically saw his first child raised via FaceTime because he was away all the time.
Yeah.
And he said that's never happening again. And that was now his why. His second one is like, this is not going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's no such thing as perfect balance. That's only going to frustrate you. But hey, taking the moments to do. There's also another one, a book called Comfort Crisis, about a guy who's going through a midlife crisis, and he decides to start going outside and outdoors. And it's amazing what happens when you do that kind of stuff every day. Take time for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps us recenter and refocus, because our version of work-life balance is very, very different.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be just it's an intrinsic part of being entrepreneurs. Our work-life balance is very different. We will answer text messages at 2 p.m. on a Sunday. It's just the way that it is. And understanding, though, kind of that balance. How do you keep that balance, though? And especially if you're in the hustle and grind, what is that specific thing that you used to do that kept you in that specific entrepreneurial life balance?
So one of the things, this, do you recognize this outline right here?
Yep. That is
If
our
you can
good
see
friend
that.
Kelly. He was just on the podcast, actually.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. So I met him at one of your events,
Yeah.
and immediately built a relationship with him. And he was walking around with this book,
Mhm.
and it's a tip that's really stayed with me. And
Oh, go
so,
ahead.
anyways, I met Kelly at an event of yours, and I see him. He's holding this book, and I said, "Well, dude, tell me about what you're doing there with this book. Is this a journal, or what exactly are you doing?" And he said what he does is he takes the time out of his day to write letters to his family.
Mm.
And I was like, well, how do you do it? And I wanted to understand exactly what he was talking about. And he said that he writes very specific things, and he tries to do it as often as he can. And he writes something specific. Can be like, hey, you're a beautiful young girl that's so amazing as a daughter. It's basically your art piece the other day was so amazing. The shading and this design was amazing. Whatever it is, something very specific, and putting it in this book. And so this is a letter right here to my daughter Kaylee. And so what I do is I take time, I write down specifically what I've, this a married daughter I have, and I write down specifically what I've noticed about her and what she's doing right now. And then I take a picture of it and I send it to her in a text, and she knows that her dad has by hand written a note to her. And it's actually kind of changed my whole perspective on engaging with children, even if you're at work and still thinking about them. Write your a nice letter to your wife, write a nice letter to your child, talk about them specifically, and it really makes an impact.
Mhm. Exactly. And it helps to keep that to some level of balance, because even though we might not be able to be there all the time, especially in the hustle, it's still, I'm still thinking about you. You're still taking space in my head, and
Yes.
you're still taking some real estate in my head. And that's the important part. Is that,
Mm,
yeah,
so
yeah.
true.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kelly's a really
Yeah.
wise guy, man.
He really is. I'll tell him that we talked about him.
His spidey sense is probably like, tingling right
He
now.
actually texted me. What's so funny is I brought that. He texted me while we're talking right now. He just felt it. He felt the vibe. Literally his vibe. He felt it. That's his brand, is the vibe. And he felt
Exactly.
the vibe. Yep. Shot us a text.
I love that, man. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely going to text him and go, Shawn told me.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. You should.
So now, before Tax Hive, before
Yeah.
you came, I wouldn't say, well, let's put
Mhm.
it out there. You had other entrepreneurs in your life when you were younger, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And specifically about your mom, because that was an
Yeah.
interesting a story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So my mom, so I think you were there when I had my mom in the room at that big event. And I was raised by a dad who was a bookstore manager, right? So he was the most even keel guy you've ever met, just the most calm, steady, amazing human being. But and then my mom is an immigrant from Scotland. So she's got a thick Scottish accent. She's been here for a lot of decades, but she still has a thick Scottish accent. As you met her, right? You talked to
Yep,
her?
we did. Yep. Yep.
Still a thick, and my other two aunties were there, and they're thick Scottish accents as well. They just were out visiting from Scotland. So my mom was my original inspiration, side hustle. And so I was inspired as a young kid with my mom, because she had to raise 5 children with you know a husband that was a bookstore manager and knew how much he was going to make, and had a very small salary for a lot of years, and she had to run the ship. So she did multiple business, preschools. We did all sorts of stuff, babysitting. I mean, it was like there was probably 10 different businesses she was operating just to be able to make ends meet. And I was really inspired by that. For me personally, I started going door to door selling my neighbors anything I could get my hands on. And I would sell them candy bars. I'd buy suckers. I would buy pencils, and I'd sell them those. And that's how I made my allowance, right? I was going to go to my dad and say, hey, give me some money. And then, so I just wanted to go, that's how I had to earn it, right?
Exactly. So it was always that kind of drive from the beginning, understanding how that worked and that
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur thing. And I think I hear that a lot. The reason I wanted to ask that question, I wanted to specifically hear that story, was because that's a common theme amongst people that are entrepreneurs. There was something early on. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was I tried to start a video company when I was 16, a video editing
Mm-hmm.
company. We all had that one thing, and we've had this thing in the
Mm-hmm.
back of our head that says, I'm different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm
I'm a
wired
CEO.
differently.
Yeah. Right.
I love
Yeah.
it. Hey, I
Yeah.
love being the black sheep of the family. It's wonderful. I did not
Yeah.
come from entrepreneurs. So,
No,
yeah,
it's like I'm going to be the one that's going to veer off course.
absolutely. I reject your
Right.
reality. I substitute my own.
Yeah. Amen to that. Takes courage.
So, growing up with a mom who was very, very hustle and
Yeah.
grind entrepreneurship, and then you were in the
Yeah.
corporate world for a while too. And
Yeah.
so, what did you do, and what was that transition to? Because that's really what I like to hear is the people that
Yeah.
have said, I was in the corporate world for a while, but then I
Hmm.
transitioned into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I was, back in the dinosaur age, there was a company called AOL,
Uh-huh.
and they've merged with Time Warner. So I was there when they merged with Time Warner. There was this internet bubble and
Yeah.
the valuations. There was some internet companies that had like very little revenue, but had 1,000 times earnings, like literally just ridiculous. Thousands of multiples on things were nuts. It was this big bubble that burst, right? It was the internet bubble. And I was basically at AOL during that time. And I was a coach, I was an assistant general manager. We had 1,000 employees. So I managed a lot of people, I mean, it was like, talk about a grind. It was 80 hours a week. And ultimately, I decided I was going to venture out and start my own business. So it was the scariest kind of moment of my life,
Mhm.
truthfully, is starting my own business. So I decided to start a live events business. So this is 2009. And if you know anything, which you do, know things about 2009, 2008,
Yeah.
2009 were miserable years. One of the biggest recessions in our age, right, was 2008, 2009. Literally, the water cooler talk was about how their homes were being foreclosed, and it was a really hard time. That's where I wish someone would have told me, "Hey, don't start a business right now in 2009." Right? Hey, just save yourself a lot of gray hair and a lot of problems. Don't start a business right now. But for whatever reason, I was like felt determined that I was going to go start a company. And I always wanted to be, I was like you, as the black sheep. I came from corporate kind of family, of bookstore dad who made probably 40,000 to 50,000 a year his whole life. And so I came from a very stable kind of business to like, I'm going to go venture out, which you have no guarantees. There's no salaries, there's no nothing. So 2009, I venture out on my own to start my own business, a live event. We're going to promote, sell tickets, all that kind of stuff. Um, so we come up with a plan that shows, according to the plan, I'm going to be a millionaire. Right? The plan's amazing. I could have showed you this plan. I should have saved a copy of that plan. It's like, hey, there's my plan. I'm going to be a millionaire right here. Bottom line. So I have a great plan. I go out and raise 1.5 million from angel investors primarily, which is a whole nother skill set.
Mhm.
If you haven't raised money before, it's a very difficult thing, pre-revenue especially, saying, hey, this is the vision, this is my team, this is where we're going, this is the plan. And I got 23 investors to have faith and confidence in me, gave me 1.5 million. So that was like probably one of the greatest days of my life, 1.5. Because I was like bookstore manager, son, came out here, started my business. Even on LinkedIn, I was a CEO now. I was the business owner. I was out there doing it. I was in the arena. I had a group of people that I just hired, and I had 1.5 sitting in that bank. That's a lot of runway, and I'm like, I'm excited to go make an impact and change the world and launch the business. And as Kevin O'Leary says, poo poo happened, and for me, poo poo happened in my business at every aspect. You name it, operations, sales, marketing, you name it. Over the next year, I lost the 1.5, gone, poof. It's all gone. And what a probably went from one of my greatest days to some of my most stressful times in my life, dealing with that at many levels that no one ever tells you about. And no one talks about this stuff on entrepreneur stuff. No one says this stuff. But no one tells you that, all those people you had confidence in that are on your team that you hired, that their families are banking on you to put food on the table. Now you have to let them down. So there's all these layers of disappointment and stress in your life at that time, right? Another one is what about the 23 investors that gave me 1.5 million? What about my family? What about my parents? What about everyone in your personal life that saw that you were CEO and was congratulating on you on the way up? What about all those people? And now you got to face the fire that you failed. It's a miserable experience. And rock bottom for me was on a Thursday night. Didn't sleep a wink because I was down. I had 2,500 bucks in the bank. Payroll was due the next day at 3,500. So I had 1,000. I was 1,000 short, and I didn't have 1,000 bucks in my name. So which means I had my house was hawked, and my cars were hawked to cover payroll and things. And long story short, I went to lunch. Get a call from my controller. She's like, "Hey, Shawn, I found $3,000 cash in the petty cash safe, which I didn't know I had. What do you want me to do with that?" I went and picked up the cash, and I drove over to the bank here, and I gave him the cash. It cleared, and we cut physical checks. And I remember handwriting the names of the individuals on my team. And I drove over to the office, and I handed each individual the check. And it was a really scary, miserable time to make payroll by $1,000. If you learn anything about Walt Disney, multiple times when he had his animation studio, didn't make payroll. He would write them out in an IOU, right? It's a miserable thing when you have people relying on you and you failed them. And I realized that, pain is what drove me more than I've ever been driven in my whole life at that moment. And I said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make some major changes. The biggest thing I did, the number one thing that changed everything for me, was building relationships in business. 100%. I met literally on Monday the next week, I met with someone who I went to sushi with, who was a mentor of mine, who was extremely successful. This guy was a phenom, intelligent entrepreneur. And we went to lunch. He started breaking down my business. And on this tablecloth, he started writing down things and giving me ideas. And I took the tablecloth and I went and put it in my office, and I started implementing stuff. And I had ultimately ended up partnering with that individual, and he brought his relationships to the table. And then we went on this crazy run, right? And we were able to pay off all 1.5 back plus interest to all of those investors to get out of it and bring it back in house. And it was only because of building relationships. So that's why 3 days a week, when I don't even feel like it, I go to events, when I text people, and I have probably 200 to 300 texts a day, but that is my core value. The greatest way to scale is scaling relationships.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I aspire to be too, as a person like you, is you always know a guy. Because I think the only people you don't know, I think there's 3 monks in Tibet that you
yeah, exactly. I got to meet those guys.
That's about it.
You need to go find those guys and then intro me.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things I really respect about you, is that relationship side of things, because I think we often think, oh, they're competitors or they're future competitors, or when really life's a team sport. And I'm going to go do, like Kelly says, I'm going to go do really cool stuff with my friends. And that's how we're going to do business. And I think it's a lot more fun. You can get a lot more done because you get a bunch of entrepreneurs in a room. You know what that's like.
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
like 7 businesses are born.
Yeah, exactly right.
And so I 100%, I love that part of being an entrepreneur, is going out and making those connections and things. And I love the fact that, you don't ever have lunch alone, as I guess one of the things too. Always having lunch.
Just got done with a lunch. Yep. I just got done with a lunch with someone. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. But I think it's really important because, most of the time as entrepreneurs, if we aren't surrounded by other people that know how we think and that knows what we're going through, because like your story in 2009, being an entrepreneur is repeatedly being hit in the gut. That's kind of how it rolls. Just understanding that we're, and just knowing how to, that sucked. Okay, let's move on, and how to deal with it. And being around other entrepreneurs who have had that same experience. I mean, your family would try to help. They're going to try to give input on it. They have no idea. It's so far outside their experience. They don't understand it. And so being folks and being able to build stuff and having mentors come in and say, here's what you need to do and need to fix, I think it's a really important part of things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, just doing an affiliate kind of arrangement or a partnership, there's so many opportunities. Literally, I see so many business owners. I'm like, well, have you gone to meet any others? And they're struggling in their business and they're on an island and they haven't really reached out of themselves to go build a relationship. You talked about our good friend, Marianne, who's an incredible trainer in presentations. She has a great following that way. And then you have the presentation. That's a great match made in heaven. That's a perfect partnership that you can see, and just look for alignment out there. So when you go to a live event, you go to have lunch with someone, just try to find the alignment. And if you want to build real relationships, go do transactions with your friends, which is not a popular idea. But go do transactions, go do deals together, and then you'll end up talking on a regular basis while you do deals and work together, and the relationships will run so much deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a relationship forged in fire, and I think those are the most powerful relationships that can be forged.
Yeah. Amen.
Awesome, man.
That's true.
So as we come to the end of this, I do want to go, I always ask my guests one thing. What is one podcast or one book that has significantly impacted your life recently? Way back in the day, there's a liberal definition. What's one book or one podcast you recommend that really changed your life?
So my number one all time is a book called Crucial Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
The multiple authors, but the reason why I got introduced to the book was my neighbor was one of the co-authors, Ron McMillan, and I really respected, loved him. He's like, you got to read this book. And it's essentially, they do years of research and they find out what makes a good manager or leader a great one versus others that aren't great managers. And they find out that it's communication. It's about communication. All this AI stuff is great, but we're losing the art of being able to sit down with an individual and communicate and have the hard message together and help develop people and take them from here to there, help them make more money, help them in their skill set, everything else. And so that book teaches you how to have those harder messages. And it really transformed my whole life, personal life, family, and then business life. That was a game changer. There's a few books in your life where you read where like it changes course. That was a change the course book for me.
Yeah. And I know you introduced me to that book, and I've had a few people who have read through this, and just having those crucial conversations and being able to have those really difficult conversations we have to have actually makes life easier. Because for a little bit of suck, and we're entrepreneurs, we're used to suck, for that wee bit of that really uncomfortable conversation could potentially cause a miscommunication to be corrected, and then from there it's easier. Or there's times when you might have had to have a conversation with your employees, a critical conversation, going, there's a problem. We don't have to cover payroll.
Yeah, exactly. And the most common mistake managers make is they just don't address the problem. They just don't. They ignore it. It never works. Or they lash out. That doesn't work either. So the third option is to have a crucial conversation that give people respect, stick to the facts. They talk about the gap. Here's the expectation. Here's the performance. Help me understand. Let's talk about it. Let's come up with a plan. Treat people with respect and love, and you'll grow your business.
I think those are my favorite question. Help me understand. Especially in difficult situations, because it's usually a difficult situation is a miscommunication, and help me understand your point of view. And I think it's a great way to have that whether or not you agree with that view, you don't have to change your mind on it, but just help me understand where you're coming from. And it's a wonderful question. I love that one.
Yeah. Amen.
Awesome, man. Well, brother, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it. It's been an awesome conversation, and awesome, man.
Let's go jump on the one wheels next time and throw the disc golf around. I introduced Andrew to one wheels and disc golf. Let's do that. Let's do that again, right?
And let's hope that this time I'm actually upright more often than I was on the first try.
I'll film the next one so you can put it on your podcast. Show everyone your skills.
It'll be an accountability moment where it's like, look, you're getting better at it. Alrighty, man.
Honor to be here, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you so much. You have a great day, man.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Shawn, check out the link in the description.